From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is U.S. Farm Report.
Welcome to U.S. Farm Report this first weekend of September. I'm Tyne Morgan, and here's what's in store over the next 60 minutes. Rotting soybeans will show you how too much rain is doing more than just stalling a harvest in the South. Labor issues remain along U.S. railways.
So our hope is that moving forward, that will provide some real momentum for some of the other remaining unions to actually come to an agreement as well.
Why a possible rail strike is now less than 2 weeks away. Meet an Iowa man who survived a grain bin entrapment just 2 weeks ago.
They just said, yeah, we're going to get you out. And I believed them.
And his message for others who are emptying grain bins this fall. That's a story of survival. And in John's world,
the change of seasonal anxieties.
Now for the news, we've turned the calendar to September, and while some farmers are just starting to think about bringing in the summer harvest, others are getting ready for another round of planting. And over the next couple of weeks, growers will be looking to plant the winter wheat crop, but putting seeds into dry soil may be challenging. Take, for example, Oklahoma, where a vast majority of the state is in some sort of drought. Recent rains have been small, meaning not much change in the latest drought monitor. Officials say soil moisture levels are also pretty depleted, and you can see in this map showing the one-day average for moisture in the top 4 inches of the soil. Most places with less than 1 inch of water available. That's not good news as we head into another winter where some forecasters are predicting dry conditions to continue.
And as you look down into those soil profiles, you know, we have sensors at 2, 4, 10, and 24 inches. Unfortunately, they get drier as we go deeper into the soil. So until we get some heavier rains that will replenish those soil moisture levels, I'm a little bit pessimistic about what our chances are going forward into our wheat crop.
Lee says current crop production in the state is down because crops have used up the water in the soil. But he does have a little bit more hope for the soybean crop. He says even irrigated crops are struggling due to high heat conditions, which impacted pollination. Well, parts of the South seeing some much needed rains, but in other parts of the South, it's too much rain hitting fields during harvest time. Take a look at Will Miller's soybean farm in Concordia Parish, Louisiana. This week in Louisiana agriculture reporting that after 2 weeks of daily, sometimes torrential rains, this is what's left of his fields. Miller has 3,000 acres of soybeans. Many soybeans have sprouted in the pod and died, leaving behind moldy soybeans. And the worst acres still have water in the field. And for many like Miller, this has been the most expensive crop ever. Miller says there was drought early in the season, causing him to irrigate 8 times, only to have too much water come at harvest time. He's now working to salvage what he can, and at last report, 55% of the state's soybeans were rated good to excellent. That's down 8 percentage points from the previous week. Well, big news in the beef world. Walmart is investing in another beef processing facility. Drovers reporting the company will become a minority partner in the sustainable beef plant that's due to be constructed in North Platte, Nebraska. 3 years ago, Walmart announced a partnership with 44 farms to provide Angus beef for about 500 stores in the Southeast. Sustainable Beef's plans are to process 400,000 head per year. That's about 1,500 head a day. Groundbreaking is scheduled for later this month, with the facility opening in late 2024. Well, 2 people could face decades in prison after being accused of defrauding investors of millions of dollars in an apparent Ponzi scheme based on cattle and marijuana. A federal grand jury found 70-year-old Reva Stocknew and Ron Throgmartin guilty of wire fraud and money laundering. Government prosecutors say the couple raised some $650 million from investors that were promised 10 to 20% returns on their money in a matter of weeks, then took the money from new investors to pay off the older investors, claiming the money was backed by short-term investments in cattle. They also solicited investments for a marijuana business. Sentencing is scheduled for January, and they could face more than 100 years in prison. And horrible losses to the farming community in a small rural North Dakota town. 4 people are now dead following a murder-suicide in North Dakota. Investigators were called to a farm just northeast of Leeds, North Dakota. There, they found 4 people dead in a wheat field. All had gunshot wounds. They've been identified as 56-year-old Doug Dolmage, the owner of the farm, who was shot in his combine while he was harvesting, and 3 others who were assisting with the harvest. That was 34-year-old Justin Bracken, 64-year-old Richard Bracken, and 59-year-old Robert Bracken, all related. Family members say there was a dispute which ended in one man killing his brother, his son, and Dolmage before turning the gun on himself. Dolmage had served as president of the Benson County Farm Bureau, friends describing him as a pillar of the community, calling his death a devastating loss.
Everybody, Doug didn't have enemies. Everybody loved Doug.
Just a tremendous role model for all of us.
If we could all be a bit more like Doug, the world would be a much better place.
Farmers in the area and friends of the Dolmage family are now coming up with a plan to help harvest Doug's crops. Just a heartbreaking story. Well, that's it for the news. And Matt Yurosavik is keeping his eye on some developments in the Gulf of Mexico. We'll get details on a possible wetter weather pattern. That's in weather next.
U.S. Farm Report is brought to you by Endzone from Farm Shop MFG, which allows you to rehydrate your soybeans from 10 to 13%. On a 20,000 bushel bin, that's an extra semi-load added to your bottom line. Order your Endzone fan now and get 13% off while supplies last.